problems, which you don't have with a granite quarry. I knew all this, so I made a comment. I wasn't real popular with the folks in the blue shirts, and I understand that, and I don't blame them. But I've done some research. When you look at all the quarries across the United States, less than 3% of them have ever had a problem with a neighbor. And of that 3%, if you take the limestone quarries out, which is a granite quarry, we're talking around 2%. There's never been a case that I can find in the state of Georgia of a granite quarry causing a problem with a well. There's been a quarry in operation in the state of Georgia since the 1870s. And that quarry is still in operation in Stockbridge, Georgia, and they're quite popular in that community. They generate a lot of income. And I've heard, the Flint River's not going to go dry. There's no pollution going to pile into Flint and seal it up. Haven't we been mining the Flint for years? What's going on in Molina for all these years? Digging the sand out. So to me, this is a perfect industry. I don't see the negatives in this whatsoever. It's not going to be a Kia plant by no means, but it's a start. And I know the budget that y'all are working with, and I know what this town looks like compared to what it looked like when I come in the 80s. And I love this county. I work in this county, and I try my best to keep my work in this county. And it's tough. And as y'all all know, this county's, we're kind of going backwards. And I think we've got a case here, some folks that don't know the truth of these quarries. The last data I seen come from Nairobi, Africa. That was what they were using to pass around. And I think that's the wrong information. But I would like y'all to reconsider this idea and think about the shape of the position we're in, because y'all got the future of this county in y'all's hands. And we need to make a kickstart somewhere. Bob, I'm sorry we took so much time, but we need to make some progress forward at some point. And I hope this is a case of that. I hope that y'all consider some compromise, or let's talk about it. Thank y'all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Fitzgerald, would you make your way to the microphone?
Commissioners, I'm Jerry Fitzgerald. I live at 1410 Willow Oaks Trail in Matthews, North Carolina. We, along with the Randall Trust, are the applicants for the proposed Meriwether County Quarry at Allenton. I'm going to keep my comments short and to the point real quick here, so I'm just going to ask your attention. We've been dealing with this quarry issue now for over a year, and this has been very controversial and contentious from the beginning, and it shouldn't be. The quarry industry in the state of Georgia has a record of exemplary success because of the regulatory mandates imposed by the state and federal authorities controlling mining operations. There are dozens of quarries operating in the state of Georgia very successfully and provide the very basic product required for building, paving, construction materials, while becoming very positive corporate neighbors to nearby residents and the host counties. Without aggregates supplied by quarries, the interstate highways would be dirt roads, and the housing we live in would be thatched huts. 7 of 9 counties surrounding Meriwether have successful granite quarries similar to the one we are proposing. Quarries provide and supply the material for growth. Growth is coming, and no one in here can stop it. The population of our country now is 330 million. By 2040, the projection is somewhere between 380 and 400 million people, and a considerable amount of that growth is here in the southeast. So here we are in Meriwether County, just south of that Atlanta Metropolitan Statistical Area, the MSA, probably one of the fastest growing areas in the southeast. But this growth opportunity has passed by Meriwether County. According to the latest census data, from 2010 to 2014, Meriwether County has lost almost 5% of its population. 61% of the population of Meriwether County works outside the county as compared to Troup County, next adjacent county, where 17% work outside the county. From 2010 to 2014, the percentage of Meriwether residents in poverty has increased from 20% to almost 24%. Almost 1 in 4 Meriwether residents live in poverty, compared to Troup, which has decreased from 20 down to less than 19. Sales and use tax generated in Meriwether County in 2015 was $1.5 million. In Troup County, it was $10.7 million. And all other financial indices from per capita income, median household income, number of households, it goes on and on. Meriwether County ranks at or near the bottom of the list of neighboring counties. Meriwether County has been on the downhill slide for 20 years. When the mills and factories in Greenville, Manchester, Woodbury, and other communities began to close, the downhill slide began. Once prosperous Manchester that was vibrant, prosperous, and offered jobs and opportunities, now just a struggling community trying to just hold on. Empty buildings, storefronts, and businesses that continue to close are commonplace in Manchester. And this is not because of mismanagement or incompetence by business owners. It's because the spendable income created by jobs and opportunity is gone. The future of the county is the young people, and there's currently nothing for them here and no reason for them to stay here. I could go on and on, you get the point. These conditions not only exist in Manchester, Woodbury, and Greenville, but all over the entire county. There's not a new car dealership in the county where you can buy a new car, and you got to go to Warm Springs or Manchester to rent a motel room. That's it. The only place in the county to get a room for the night. Meriwether County has over 500 miles of unimproved roads and not one local quarry to supply crushed stone for maintenance of these roads. On occasion, in the winters, residents have to hitch up their 4x4 trucks like mule teams to pull school buses out of the ruts and potholes in the roads, not in the ditches, so the kids can go to school. So, here comes my group along with the proposal of the quarry. This location at Appleton is ideal for a quarry because of the attributes consisting of available mineable granite, a rail line, and highways to transport it. A very large 770-acre site is owned by one owner, and this size insulates and shields the community from possible distraction of quarry operation. This location is very rural, which is an ideal location for quarry. The quarry will offer jobs, tax revenue, opportunity, and the demand for supporting industries for fuel, supplies, equipment, and an assortment of peripheral companies that will further compound the opportunity of the quarry. The quarry will offer a boost to the county like hasn't happened in decades. The quarry operator will be a global corporation that will help bring prosperity and opportunity back to Meriwether County. Our group has commissioned 8 professional studies comprising data and substantiation for mineral quality to minimal, if any, impact to local residents. We have proven by professional studies that this proposed quarry will successfully operate, not based on conjecture, fabrication, fairy tales, stories out of Nairobi, Kenya, but factual substantiation from proven operation of quarries operating right here in Georgia. And we have the data to prove our position that this quarry will be very successful. We have offered to agree to conditions on the quarry development that were enclosed with our last letter, and those are very similar to and address the subject of the conditions suggested by staff as an attachment to its report. The quarry cannot solve all the problems in Meriwether County, but no one can deny it's a step in the right direction. What is really important to Meriwether County, it costs the county nothing to bring in the quarry, nothing. We ask for no tax credits, no tax incentives, no special industrial revenue bonds, no public grants, no land donation, no utility or infrastructure costs to be incurred by the county. Just the approval of the zoning and special use permit to enable the quarry to operate on this site. It is absolutely our intent to operate the quarry on this site. It is absolutely our intent to operate a quarry on this site. The county doesn't have to be responsible for regulations and laws for the quarry to operate. When the zoning is approved, it goes on to the state and federal agencies. Commissioners, I'm going to cut this short because this is not the time we thought we'd have. Commissioners, you have the opportunity to all of Meriwether County residents, all 20,000 plus, not just the Alberton residents. They are well considered in this project by the factual evidence that their lifestyles will not be infringed upon, and at the same time involved opportunity for all of Meriwether County. You also have a responsibility to consider 7 job applications that were generated as a result of job opportunities for quarry positions on our website. Tonight, Commissioners, the opportunity to change the direction of Meriwether County based on factual data, evidence, and proof of successful quarry operations in many other Georgia granite quarries is up to you. The time to stop the downslide of Meriwether County is now. I'm Jerry Fitzgerald. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Mr. Norman.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Again, I'm Bob Norman. I'm the attorney for the applicants. We appreciate all of your attention and patience in reading the voluminous information we submitted. That was a lot of information, 500 pages in a zoning binder that was detailed and summarized in great detail in a letter of intent with that application. And then last week we submitted another letter that contained responses to contentions by the opposition consultants from our own consultants refuting what they claimed about their reports. We submitted conditions that we would be willing to agree to that address virtually all of the conditions and concerns addressed by the conditions of that the staff recommended. We addressed the significantly deficient, we respectfully submit, report and recommendation by the staff in the letter, and in an attached copy of that recommendation where we addressed every deficiency in their conclusions, extremely one-sided, unsupported, unsubstantiated, adopting the opposition contentions about this project. And it did not provide you the information you need or the report or the evaluation that you need to make a fair and correct decision for Meriwether County about this proposed granite mining facility. I'm going to cut mine short as well, what I expected to say based on the time constraints.
You got 18 votes.
The opposition is based on emotions, scare tactics, spread on social media, allegations by attorneys and consultants hired to oppose this meritful zoning request to speculate about possible concerns from this facility that have never been experienced by any of the many quarries and granite quarries in the state. There's not one shred of evidence that they've created any of the concerns that are alleged against this quarry by the opposition group. They do not give you any credible reasons to deny this zoning and land use request for the subject property to the harm of Meriwether County. They're using distraction tactics by bringing up things like endangered species and cultural resources and any number of other things that are all evaluated at the state level. We talked about the extensive state permitting requirements, regulatory requirements, operational requirements that are at the state level. And you're not super regulators. Once again, like they did when they discussed the text amendment before you, they wanted you to become super regulators, take on the roles of geologists and engineers and groundwater specialists and water quality specialists at the Georgia EPD and address all of these concerns that will be addressed if this project is allowed to move forward. You are not issuing tonight, whatever your decision, you're not issuing a permit for this granite quarry. You're simply looking at the land use criteria and allowing it to move forward to the state permitting process where these applicants will have to meet very extensive state environmental regulations, blasting rules and regulations, air quality rules and regulations, water quality rules and regulations, stormwater rules and regulations. They're extensive. And I think all of y'all know that and understand that. This is about a zoning approval, a request for rezoning and special use approval under the criteria in your zoning ordinance and under the applicable Georgia law. And I'm going to talk about both in a minute. Facts. There's no question, it's indisputable, whatever the other consultants say, that this property contains very significant, valuable granite resources. To quote the consultant who supervised the exploration, it's a massive and significant in nature and highly suitable for the mining and production of high quality, dimensional stone, crushed aggregate, and landscaping sands. He confirmed that again in the letter to you submitted last week. There are proven granite reserves on this property of over 265 million tons, over 100 million tons of probable additional mineable, saleable tons of granite reserves, and in 25 years of granite production from this facility, if allowed to move forward, and if permitted by the state, will result in net present value of only $77 million, and that's net present value of net income. There's no question this is a valuable property. It's unique for all the reasons that Mr. Fitzgerald touched on. There's a rail line right through the middle of it, and two highways on two of the borders. It's one large enough property that, you've seen this before, the diagram here, which I see is not up here, but it allows for very significant buffer areas all around the property from any surrounding uses. The northern area, microphone. I hope this is, yeah, good. Turn this up this way. The northern portion of the site, consists of 325 acres. Only 120 acres of that would be used for pit and plant site. Everything else is in major roads and things, but everything else is buffer and overburden files and screening buffers, and natural vegetation. I showed the photograph with the letter last week, and you can see how heavily planted the vegetation of the property is all the way around. So much more could have been used, but this is a 90-acre pit area surrounded in a plant site. So it's a total of 120 acres within 325 that would be used in that area is active. All this is 80-some acres, all this floodplain between the site and White Oak Creek. 87 acres of floodplain never be touched. Whatever's in that floodplain, whether it's species or cultural resources from Indian mounds or whatever, it'll never be touched. It'll never be disturbed. This area down here is another large area from the creek down to Highway 362 that will never be disturbed, as indicated by the green area. The southern acreage is 267 acres, with only 67 acres total of pit and plant site, everything else in buffer. And we have proposed what we think is more than adequate buffer, 100-foot natural vegetated buffer, and you've seen what that consists of. 100-foot planted berm inside of that, and then overburden piles around here between the pit area and those few residences up on Split Railroad, and over here between the small number of residences west of 85. We have offered the alternative buffer that was recommended. We're agreeable to that, to do the alternative buffer recommended by the state. And that's 200 feet of undisturbed area with a 100-foot planted berm inside of that. Either way, it's a significant buffer for this site that will prevent more than minimal, maybe no impact, but certainly no more than minimal impact to anybody in the area, any other persons or property uses. Now, the map that the opposition's been using showing all these yellow lots, those apparently show individual properties in the whole area around the quarry site. Many of those are not used for residential uses. Many of them, as you've been talking about, are in conservation use easements. So they're mostly off the tax rolls of the county. Probably hundreds of thousands of acres, I would imagine, if you look at that. If you talk about the properties that are residential, that are actually near the site, and these are some of the, I'm not picking on anybody, these are some of the individuals that the correspondence with you from Mr. Stack identifies as residents living immediately adjacent to the site. Well, they don't live immediately adjacent to the site by any means. First, once you get beyond the buffers, you got Mr. Spangler over here, whose property is halfway covered in floodplain, and his home's way over here on the road back here. Mr. Coleman is, let's see, down here, again, half of his property is floodplain. The house is way over here. Same thing to the south, you've got Mr. Stovall and Mr. McConnell down in these areas. Both their houses are way down here on the other side of the floodplain from the boundary of the property. And then you've got Mr. Hurd over here, who is west of Highway 85, and then several others that were named in the correspondence who aren't adjacent property owners. So yeah, there are residents in the area, but none of them are immediately joining the property line. We've got these extensive buffers within the property line. They're not going to be impacted, and that's what all the factual information we've provided you shows. Now, I know you don't want a long discussion. Well, let me, before I get there, very quickly on the character area map. That's been heavily relied on in the recommendation for denial of this application, but it's entirely being misused, I submit. In the standards and procedures for local comprehensive planning requirements of the Department of Community Affairs, character area means a specific geographic area or district within the community that has unique or special characteristics to be preserved or enhanced, like a downtown, a historic district, an arts district, a neighborhood, a transportation corridor. It's a sub-area within, I'm not going to read the whole thing, a character area is a sub-area within the community where more detailed small area planning and implementation of certain policies, investments, incentives, or regulations may be applied. Well, if you look at the character area map, it's up here, but you can't see it. If you look at the character area map, the rural development designation covers virtually the entire county. And the rural development designation does not allow any sort of development. So if this character area map is followed by you to deny whether it's this zoning application or future zoning applications for commercial and industrial development, you're not going to have it in the county. It is not the purpose under your zoning ordinance or Georgia law that a comprehensive plan, much less a character area map, be used to determine zoning decisions. That's not the purpose. It's a planning tool. And as I say, if you used it as a zoning tool here, then you would not allow commercial and industrial development virtually anywhere in the county. This shows existing, the purple, limited areas where there's already existing industrial development. Pretty much all you got left is 100 acres in Meriwether Park that was probably being reserved for another kilo supplier, which would be great. But the land, just like the other lots, would have to be given to them with other incentives to bring them to Meriwether County. So if you're using the comprehensive plan and the character map to make zoning decisions, and you can just tell people they can't file applications anymore for industrial commercial development in the county unless it's just a convenience store. Now, I do need to address for just a minute, got 5 more minutes. I don't want to give you a legal lesson on zoning law, but nevertheless, the law is very important for you to consider in this decision. Your decision is based on the facts, the criteria in the zoning ordinance, and the Georgia law dealing with zoning decisions and how you make constitutional zoning decisions. The law is discussed at some length in both of our letters, the letter of intent and the letter last week. So I'm just going to repeat a little of it to put it in context. It's a long-established principle of Georgia zoning law that local governments have a duty and obligation to work with property owners to allow them the highest and best use of their property. I'm not going to give the sites, but they're all in my letters. That obligation includes local government consideration of ways in which objections to a proposed development may be eased by local government action, like the conditions that applicants have proposed to you as additions to this zoning request. Because zoning ordinances restrict the property owner's right to freely use his property for any lawful purpose, a zoning ordinance and its application to a particular property must not infringe upon constitutional guarantees of the state and federal constitution by unnecessarily or unreasonably restricting property rights. Under Georgia law, the current LDR zoning classification of this property, which limits its use for the last 35, 40 years or more, and for that length of time into the future, LDRs will limit the use of this property to growing trees. Now, it can continue to be used for growing trees, but trees take 25 years to grow, and there's no value until they're harvested. Clearly, the highest and best use of this property, with its valuable granite resources and the other advantageous characteristics that exist nowhere else in the county. Nobody else will come and apply for a granite quarry in the county because there's no other site that has the unique characteristics of this site that make it advantageous for the development and operation of a granite quarry, a granite mining facility. Going back to the law, this current, I'm going to address it to this project. The current LDR zoning classification of this property may only be justified if it bears a substantial relation to the public health, safety, or welfare when those are balanced against the detriment, substantial detriment here caused to the property owner by restricting the property to that zoning classification and here to growing trees for the foreseeable future. If the zoning results in relatively little gain or benefit to the public but inflicts serious injury or loss on the owner, it's deemed to be a confiscation of property rights. Significant detriment can be shown by facts which show a reduction in economic viability of the property and a decrease in land value if the property remains under its current zoning classification, as compared to the value of the property if rezoned to allow a higher and better use. Again, these principles are in my last letters with all the citations to the Georgia case law that discusses those elements of Georgia law. In this case, we submit that significant detriment to these property owners, the applicants, from keeping this property in LDR zoning is clearly a significant detriment. And when you consider all the facts, not the allegations and the fears and so forth, but consider all the facts, consider the fact that all this is going to be highly regulated during permitting and operation by the state regulatory authorities, the detriment to these property owners for keeping this LDR zoning on the property is very significant and very much outweighs any benefits to the public, to the people in this area, or the rest of, certainly the rest of the county. And therefore, the request for zoning approval ought to be granted. Going back just a second to the comprehensive plan, got 1 minute left. That's where I want to end. Meriwether County is a great place to live, but it's not going to be a great place to live if the county doesn't improve its tax base and reduce taxes and provide services and have the money to provide services. It all takes an economic foundation to provide services to the residents. A granite quarry on this site, and we think we've proven this without any reasonable dispute. A granite quarry on this site will not change the overall small county rural character of Meriwether County. This is 700 acres out of 505 square miles. It will, however, bring economic development and growth and tax base and therefore be extremely beneficial from an economic standpoint and tax base standpoint to the county. It will utilize the rail line, which is one of the objectives in the comprehensive plan. The plan says for progressive leadership, we will foster economic prosperity. This is your opportunity, commissioners, tonight to carry out that vision statement in the comprehensive plan and to apply the comprehensive plan in a positive, proper, beneficial manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. I'll give you a little time to move out.
Thank you, Mr. I apologize again. I learned to use microphones better.
Thank you. What I'm seeing here, Mr. Stack, is again, just let me reiterate, Gene King goes first, Eddie Hinton second.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to give my time to Mr. Don,
You're giving it to who? I'm sorry.
to Don Stack.
Oh, you're giving it back to Don Stack. Okay, Gene.
All I was going to do is point out that the judge had nothing to do tonight.
All right. So that moves me on to Mr. Eddie Hinton. Would you come forward?
Thank y'all for y'all's time.
Go ahead and state your name and address.
My name's Hall Edward Henry. I live at 565 Riggins Ferry Road in Woodbury, Georgia. The quarry probably won't affect me as much as the folks in Hamilton. I was born in Stockbridge, Georgia, in Henry County. There is a quarry there. Quarry was there long before I was born. But I can tell you the damage it done to my grandmother's house, neighbors around the house. At least once a year growing up, me and my father had to go over there. She lived in an older house. We had to go over there constantly and level her house up. Every time they would blast, pictures would fall off the walls. Behind the house, it was rock that come up out of the ground. My grandfather had actually dug it out with a pickaxe and formed a depression to collect. That's how they got their water, from a spring that come up out of the ground. The spring, don't know what happened, but it got to where you couldn't drink the water. The water was terrible. County had to bring in and put in water for her. Everybody down that road that had wells. The neighbor down the street, when I was growing up, the neighbor down the street back in them days, when they dug a pool, the pool was all concrete. It didn't have liners, it was a concrete pool. Within 2 years of him putting that pool in, the cost of repairing the pool from the blasting of the quarry got more than he could afford, and he wound up just covering it up. Our house where I grew up at, on Old Conyers Road, the sheetrock, and we was on a slab foundation. The slab was cracked. Water, when it rained real heavy, water would come up through the foundation, through the floor. I understand that, he talks about, yes, it will bring economic growth to the area. Go over, right now today, go over to Rock Quarry Road and look at the roads that are continually that the county is having to put out money to repair. The roads around the Rock Quarry area. I understood the gentleman said a buffer, that they was gonna have a buffer. Go over there on 138 now and look. You can see the quarry now. There used to be a buffer there. There's no longer a buffer. They gradually got the quarry bigger and bigger until you can see it from 138 going down the road. I grew up in there. I grew up near a quarry. I don't agree with it, but that's up for y'all. Thank you for your time.
Please hold that applause. Hold your applause. At this time, Mr. P.J. Calhoun, am I pronouncing that right?
As young as I used to be. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak. I was born and raised in Meriwether County in the Upper Ninth District in 1933. I belong to Mount Carmel Methodist Church. I've been a member 70 years. And it's about 2 miles from the border, the so-called. And I want to tell you about the danger now. They had an explosion to get away from them. It blew rock through houses. They had about 5 houses on Rose Stella Road. And there's a rock fell at my house. It weighed about 25 pounds. And it was at the foot of a pine tree. See, it blew it straight up and it came back down because it blew sideways. It would never got there because they got a forest between me and them. And, but that rock dust is if you ever been over there, there's a pile of rock dust, big as Stone Mountain. And they supposed to run sprinklers on it. Well, that's done gone down the drain. And all I ever see up there is a bulldozer. And That's all I got to say. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir, appreciate that. Mr. Stack?
Mr. McCoy, may he approach and provide copies to you all, please?
That will be fine, bring them on up.
Thank you. Thanks. Good evening, sir. And Commissioners, I'm Don Stack on behalf of a number of residents, Citizens for Action for Meriwether Inc., Flint River Keeper Inc., and numerous property owners, including but not limited to folks that are listed in the booklet that we gave you, the book we gave you. As an initial matter, I think it's interesting Mr. Fitzgerald and Mr. Norman both spent a great deal of time trying to assert that this is based upon concerns in Nairobi, Kenya, and that it's based upon scare tactics and speculation. Nothing could be further from the truth. We have taken, as I expressed previously, and also at the Planning and Zoning Committee or Commission meeting, we spent a considerable amount of time, effort, and money actually addressing facts as opposed to speculation, as opposed to rumors and innuendo. And we took the time, effort to actually address the purported experts that Mr. Norman or Mr. Fitzgerald has put forth. And what you have in front of you, and obviously we're not going to spend, the multiple, literally days and days and days that it took that I've read through these, but I want to tell you about what we've actually established as facts as opposed to innuendo. The first tab, and they're all tabbed for you, the first tab, of course, is our written comments that summarize who it is that we represent and the argument. And like Mr. Norman says, we don't want to get into a long, lengthy legal discussion, but nothing could be further than what Mr. Norman said in terms of what the standard is in terms of whether or not you should rezone this property. And as it was appropriately addressed at the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, and again this evening by the staff, the standard is not whether or not it's going to wreak some harm upon the applicant, but rather whether or not it has a currently existing value, whether the property as currently zoned has a use. And the Georgia courts have made it abundantly clear that whether or not it can get more money from a different use is not the issue. In fact, the Georgia courts have even said, and I will quote, "We note that in zoning challenges, the pertinent question is not whether rezoning would increase the value of the property, but rather whether the existing zoning classification serves to deprive a landowner of property rights without due process of law." This is his due process of law. That the property would be more valuable if rezoned borders on being irrelevant. Instead, the only relevant evidence regarding the value of the subject property is its value as it is currently zoned. And so, and we put that in a record because I want you to think about that and be mindful of that. The other thing that I think we need to address is Mr. Norman's continued assertion
that we're asking you to act as super regulators, or that you're being asked by the staff to act as super regulators, and that go ahead and trust us and don't worry about DNR is going to take care of this at a later stage in time. The surface mining folks there. Leave aside the fact that there's literally 4 people in the surface mining program for the entire state, at least last time I checked. So the Georgia courts, again, the Supreme Court of Georgia, have said, quote, and this is the Georgia Marble Company versus A.D. Walker, so it deals with a mining company making this exact same argument. We think that the act, meaning the Surface Mining Act, establishes minimum regulations for surface mining that must be complied with throughout the state. But it does not prohibit a political subdivision from enacting and enforcing through zoning regulations different or more restrictive requirements than those called for by the state act. So you have within your power, and that's exactly why you're sitting up there, within your power to address the zoning application based upon facts, based upon information, based upon the standards that are set forth in your code, and that Mr. Garrett and Mr. Gay appropriately addressed in their evaluation. And like I said, in tab 1, we lay that all out for you, and we tell you how it is that the standards for the rezoning have been met in terms of you denying this application. But then let's turn to what they say their purported experts are. If you turn to tab 2, behind that is an assessment of what they considered their valuation or their appraisal of the properties. And you can look at page 1, and this is by Pritchett, Ball, and Wise. And he says, I conclude that there are significant deficiencies, errors, reliance on reports and valuation inputs prepared by others, which do not appear to coincide with Mr. Hayter's, that's Mr. Fitzgerald's opinion, expert, stated opinion and values. They're incongruent, misaligned statements, as well as significant shortcomings in parameters in his evaluation. But most importantly, if you look at page 2, he says that there is no information provided in terms of the data, that he says that Mr. Hayter, their expert, continues to use the phrase tax value, that's quote unquote, and that's not even a recognized appraisal term. Yet he invents this term to sit there and say, here's what the tax value for this property is going to be. The bottom of page 2 of Mr. Ball's, or the tab 2, says, no data was provided that would allow a reader to know whether the property tax revenue for this property will increase or decrease, or by how much, or if taxes will stay the same following rezoning. So they go through a long discussion about that. And then our expert sits there and evaluates that and says that without any details, this is page 3, the increased tax revenues that they say you're going to reap as a result of this are guesstimates and are not reliable to prove if or what the sales or personal property taxes would be. In other words, it's all guesstimates. So then we go on and on and on, okay? The Hayter report, page 4, does not adequately or reliably provide a meaningful estimate of the sales or sales taxes, which may result in rezoning and permitting the quarry. I tell you all this because the whole point is that they tell you these things, but when you actually look behind the curtain, it's the Wizard of Oz time. You look behind the curtain and there's nothing there. There's no actual facts and data to support that. So and to prove that, go to continue on in this report, 51 pages long, in which we addressed each of the supposed sales that their appraiser addressed, and you will see, starting at page, for example, let me try to get the numbers right here, that on page 16, for example, he talks about distance for one of the sales. And he says it's 0.06 miles away, 317 linear feet from the quarry. And when in reality, when you actually go look at it, it's 1,985 feet away. So he's off by a factor of 6. And then he tells you no harm, no foul. You don't have to read all these. You can literally go through it. Our expert made it real easy for us. Just for all the red lines for example, on page 21, he says that it's 422 feet, for example, on a site, when in reality it's 3,775 feet. Now the question you gotta ask yourself, is this just sloppy? Or was this intentionally misleading you? So that's the kind of information. He, for example, also uses a comparable, let me make sure I get this one right, on page 25. And talks about the estate of Daisy Bone Middleton. He uses that as a comparable, completely overlooking the fact that the lady who was a widow died and was probably trying to unload the house as a result of the death of her spouse. And yet they say, no, that's a comparable. It's not. So that's the kind of information. Oh, the other thing, for example, that the buyer probably has a biased opinion of quarries because the buyer is in a granite countertop business. And yet that's the kind of information or data they're providing to you. So that just gives you one example. And Mr. Sniff is telling me that I need to hurry up because we only have 15 minutes. So take a couple of minutes, thumb through those. Then we go to our next expert at tab 3. He deals with, make sure I get this right, Dr. Sam Kiger, who talked about, you'll notice they didn't say anything about blasting. They didn't really want to talk about blasting. Let me tell you who Dr. Sam Kiger is. Instead of looking about what his conclusions are, go to the back of his report and you'll see that Dr. Kiger is literally the world's foremost expert on this. And what did Dr. Kiger do? He worked for the counter-terrorist staff for the White House, for Special Projects Office in the U.S. Secret Service, to perform vulnerability surveys and analysis on several nationally prominent structures and terrorist and explosion protection. He worked for the Supreme Allied Powers of Europe to their bunker for the command center for NATO. And so you look at that and say, okay, so what does this gentleman have to say? And again, without going to, but I'll give it to you in short. What he says, and believe me, there's more reading here than you ever want to know, but go to page 5. The formula, in other words, addressing why he concludes this. The probability of damage in 100 events is about 99%. And that the implies damage to the home would be almost certain during the operating life of the proposed quarry. Then based upon their own statements that the blasting will occur at least twice every month, if the statement is correct, and that's all they blast, then there is a 99% probability of damage to the more than 100 homes discussed above within the first 4 years of quarry operations, and about 8 years if blasting only occurs 6 out of 12 months per year. And where that 100 homes come from, contrary to what Mr. Norman says, there are 100 homes within a 3/4 mile radius of this proposed application. All the yellow lines there are the folks we represent. Those properties have homes on them. So to sit there and say that there's not going to be impact is just downright wrong. Dr. Kiger addresses at page 6 the information that the gentleman, Mr. Calhoun, addressed about fly rot damage and talked about that. So, based upon the foregoing, blasting the proposed quarry has a high likelihood of damaging many of more than 100 residential structures within 1 to 2 miles of the proposed granite pits over the life of the proposed operation. All that, and it's all supported in our submittal. We then turn to the actual geology of it to address their contention that this is in fact a viable economic solution. And again, that's at tab 4. And Brian Fowler, who's been 45 years, he was the actual, geologist for the state of New Hampshire. And in fact, he's the adjunct professor at the University of New Hampshire. I think this is great. It's called the Granite State College. I think he knows a little bit about granite. He sits there and says there's just absolutely no way that they can make these representations based upon 4 core samples, and that there's the high likelihood, the contrary to what they say, this is not an economically and operationally feasible operation. So we didn't rely just on some guy up in New Hampshire. We actually then hired an expert here in Columbus State University, Dr. Clinton Barano, at page tab 5, who tells you exactly why that is on a local basis, why the geology is such, the contrary to their assertions, this is not going to be feasible. We then, of course, addressed the issues about noise. And you'll find it interesting that we specifically asked the opposing side to give us their CAD data as to why they could conclude what they did. They wouldn't provide that to us. So that at 6 and 7, we actually went through and had our own expert and now analyzed this. And that is behind page tab 7, in which he says that there will be significant, contrary to what they again say, that there will be significant harm in noise levels that far exceed the World Health Organization. There are at least 20 to 21 homes projected to exceed the appropriate noise guidelines, and at least 4 to 14 will exceed the WHO guidelines for serious noise annoyance to the northern and southern quarries. Okay? That's tab 7. Then Mr. Norman or Mr. Fitzgerald want to minimize the likelihood, significance of cultural resources. That's behind tab 8, and you'll see that the conclusion for that is that there are significant historical and cultural sites on the site, and that again their assessment is incomplete. Page tab 9. Again, we looked at. He may want to minimize this, but we did in fact look at the water quality issues and the Endangered Species Act, and that's set forth at tab 9. This says in fact there are very significant concentrations of endangered and threatened biological species there. So I understand that I don't have a lot of time here, but I want you to understand fully that as we state in the tab 1, to go through this entire analysis to tell you exactly why it's appropriate for you to deny this. They haven't met their burden. It's not up to this community to sit there and tell all the reasons why this shouldn't be. It's up to them to tell you why it should be, and they haven't done that. They haven't met their burden. We lay all that out. I said this at the planning and zoning hearing, and I mean it again here. Garbage in, garbage out. When they give you an application that's really devoid of actual data, then you can't rely on that. The folks that we hired had no dog in this fight. They're not going to jeopardize their professional relationships and their long history of for God's sakes, he works for the White House, for God's sakes. He's not going to sit there and tell you that this has a 99% probability of damaging homes for someplace down in Meriwether County. He's going to put his name on that. If it's not true, absolutely not the case. So we go through, like I said, we go through the entire thing. I know you guys are probably tired of dealing with this, but I'm telling you, this is the single biggest decision. The sky is not falling, like Mr. Norman says. These folks have made a very conscious decision to live where they do. You've made a very conscious decision as part of your comprehensive plan for how you want the county to grow, how you want it to be perceived. And you don't want it to be another Atlanta. You don't want it to be DeKalb County. You've made a conscious decision to do that. That decision should be respected. You've got the legal basis, you've got the factual basis, you've got the practical basis for saying, folks, we want to continue the smart growth for this community. We don't want to sit there and sell out the immediate, the short term, and the long term for fake numbers. You want real economic growth here. And yeah, sometimes that's a little bit harder. Sometimes that may take a little bit longer to develop it, but you're doing that. You've got a thriving movie industry. You've got folks who are sitting there who made a conscious decision to make those commutes because they want that quality of life. And you're gonna throw that away for this? I would ask you not to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stack. We had said earlier that we were going to have a break before the rebuttal starts. So at this time, I'm going to declare a 10-minute break, and then we'll all come back and reconvene. Thank y'all.